Welcome back to Wayfinding, Journey to Become a Temple of God. We're going to continue chapter 3, which Castaways in Search of Belonging, how humanity seeks to be at home in transience. We're going to be looking at the biblical concept of tabernacle and tabernacling. Tabernacle was a symbol of God's presence among the Israelite nation. As they followed Moses to the promised land, a tabernacle was a symbol and a sign that God was there dwelling with them, was a part of their story, a part of their world, and that God had a role in their world, and that the world was meant to revolve around him, that the world system of the nation that he was founding, as the Levitical code and the laws were how humanity could dwell alongside God in that old covenant period. And so all the laws were so that the tabernacling of God's presence would continue and that they would see divine presence and intervention in their world house, and that God would be not just a member but the leader and guide of their home, that he would be the Lord of their home, that he would be the one guiding and directing where the nation was heading and protecting the people of Israel and the Jewish nation, as they were slaves, and now they were going to come to form a nation and a city, a people group that would be organized, but that order of their society was supposed to be theocentric, and the tabernacle was a symbol of the theocentricity that God called the Jewish people at that time to become as his ambassadors, as his light and his truth witnesses in the world thousands of years ago. So tabernacling, becoming members of a community. From a biblical perspective, in what ways can human world dwellers be considered tabernaclers? All humans tabernacle, but not all humans tabernacle together and make a tabernacle together and dwell together, just as you can live in a town filled with people, but they may not know your name, you may not know their name, you don't know their story, your lives you don't have a part in each other's story by and large, that you're not really cooperating or working together or coming together to accomplish some purpose or agenda or mission, to be organized, unless you do organize and you do become a part of an organization. So you can live in a town, live around humans, but not be a tabernacler, not be one who dwells in association with others, that forms identity in relation to others, that has an identity in relation to others. If you don't have friends or connections or loved ones that you do life with, then you're alone, that you're solo, that you are a vagabond, that you're not a part of a group of people. You're not fitted together in working with others like in an organization. But what we're called to be is tabernaclers, and we all tabernacle, even if we just tabernacle in our own world of our own creation, or just tabernacle alone, as some people do. To truly understand the existential significance of this term, let us examine how the Bible renders it in the original biblical Hebrew and Greek. The word translated as tabernacle in Greek is the word skeneo. Skeneo refers to the act of occupying, making habitation, and residing. So to occupy is to be present, but it's not to just be present, but to have a place. So you may occupy a place, you may keep it well kept, you may clean it, you may have certain objects that belong to you or certain items that you use. Like if you occupy a home, if you visit some neighbor's house, you may not occupy their house, meaning that you may not sleep there, or you may not do the dishes or clean or be a part of maintaining that place in an orderly fashion, or having a role in that place, just as others in that house expect things from you on a daily basis, so that house continues. So you can be present, but you may not occupy. And occupying requires participation, it requires engagement, it requires you making something a home and you fulfilling a role. Like if you have an office, if you have a new job, you're called to occupy a desk, and not so that desk represents your role in that organization to help maintain the order and the purpose and the goals of that organization. So to occupy it is to be a member who's working to promote the agenda of that organization. It is to make habitation, meaning it is to dwell, to live with, to go alongside. I mean, it's not, if you have a family, you're going with them and living life with them on a daily basis. It's not like you're living in one house one day, another house on another day, another house on another day. If you're a nomad, just going from tent to tent, then you may not make a habitation. But a habitation is where your life becomes to revolve around a particular location, a particular environment, and that you become a part of that, maintaining the order of that space and becoming identified with that space and residing. This word emphasizes how this act affects interpersonal communion with others in a settled environment. And so to really tabernacle, it requires relationship. Without a house can be not a home if you don't have relationship with one another, if you're alien to one another, if the concerns or fears and anxieties or hopes or dreams are all just alone in the thoughts and the mind and the imagination of each individual, then you are not really a home, because you're not really having that communion and that togetherness of life. Like, we are all here together. We're here to help promote each other's common good. We're here to share each other's burdens. We're here to do life together. But tabernacling requires that communion, and that's why the idea that the divine would want to tabernacle with us is amazing. Is it that the divine isn't just here to dictate everything we should do for him and neglect actually caring about us? Is to tabernacle is to care, is to want to promote the good of that dwelling. It's wanting to promote, just like if you join an organization, you want to help promote it. I've been in work situations where some people on the team don't want to contribute and they don't want to help the company do better, and they're actually a hindrance because you expect them to do something and they don't follow through. And so then that goal or responsibility is neglected, and that part of the mission of the organization is compromised because of people being in organization but not really tabernacling, not really promoting the good of that organization and participating and engaging in keeping it orderly. That's why parents give children chores, so that they can learn what it means to maintain order in an environment and how to have a role and a responsibility, that if you miss out, there are consequences. Just as if you continually neglect your role at your job, you could get fired or laid off. Or you could, if you're working on commission, you won't get a commission. Or if you're doing something illicit, you could go to jail. We can find this word in the biblical passages. Now the word became flesh and took up residence, gene, among us. This is very significant, because not only is God's word dictating the order of creation, the blueprint of creation, not only is the word of God establishing the order of the human body and the planets and the earth and the solar system, but he wants to be a participant in that world, that God wants to be a part of our world. Just as I mentioned before, it's as if an author of the story wrote a part for himself in the story. So not only is he super contextual, but he's also contextual, that he has identity and role and relationships in that story. And so the fact that the Word of God, which is God who was not incarnate, who was not an embodied being, became embodied so that he would dwell in a particular place, a particular time, having certain responsibilities, dwelling with certain people, and trying to promote the good and the order as one of the people in that society. That he was healing people directly and doing miracles that were showing that God is present, caring and tabernacling and bringing order to a chaotic world, and bringing harmony and peace and love and light to a dark and discordant world. And so the fact that the word tabernacles means that God wants to dwell with us, to be a part of our life, to be a part of our house, and we're actually be a part of his house. And actually what Christ came to do is to invite us to become a residence of God, to become a tabernacle as he tabernacles with us, he wants us to tabernacle with God. He wants us to share the same way that he tabernacled with God the Father and the Holy Spirit. The Son wants us to dwell in that same union and community of the Trinity in our own way of life, in our own life story, that he's inviting us, because the home of God is becoming in our world. He's inviting us to become a part of that organization, a part of that order, a part of that unity. Just as any organization you may join all has order. There's certain things that order that organization, certain agendas that direct the initiatives of that organization. And so when we want to join God's organization, we're aligning with his vision and his order. Just as any organization that does charity work, they have different responsibilities. Someone handles the money, someone handles the political connections or the advertisement or inventory or distribution, or logistics. Like, in order to be a charitable organization, there has to be the order, the structure, and the mission that all that order is meant to exist for. You can have an organization, but if you lose sight of the mission or purpose of an organization, then you lose sight of the meaning and the purpose for which that organization was established. And that's why Jesus' day of religion was very orderly, and it was orderly around God and worship of God and doing the will of God, but they were actually disconnected from the true tabernacling will of God to show grace and mercy and love to humanity. Instead, people use religion to promote selfish ambition and to demean others and to just have judgment without mercy and grace. And so Christ exposed even though there was an order to the religion of his day, it was misdirected from the purpose and mission of God's house. And so it became a house without God. And so when the perfect example of this is the church of his day became just about the money changers that were extorting people. And, well, this is just a perfect practical example. The early church brought their money together to help each other that was in need. Now many churches will collect tithe and they actually don't distribute it to those in need in their community. A lot of people in their organization or their community or their institution may be desperately in need of money to pay the rent or just had medical bills. And so instead of that money being given to the people, it's given to pay salaries or do other things or maintain the building and stuff, but it doesn't actually go to take care of the people. And so in the same way, the people were using sacrifices of religion to say, hey, you people do these rituals, perform these rituals in our church, and then go and be on your way and leave your tithe, without actually investing in healing and restoring those people and equipping them for their priestly ministry. They just almost treat it like a transaction. You show up for a few hours, you do these rituals, you give your money to the plate, and then you be on your way. And there is no true community. There's no true tabernacle. There's no true house of God. There's no true intimacy with God and one another. It is an organization that's not a home. And many churches, unfortunately, are like that, where many people are strangers to the pastors, or they never actually have a relationship with the pastor. The pastor isn't knowing that this person's going through a divorce, or this person's struggling with addiction, or this person's dealing with this, whatever they're dealing with, because there's a disconnect, because it's a house without a home. There is no true connection of the soul and the spirit in that place. And so Jesus rebuked at that house of God mentality or model that neglects the true house of prayer, which is divine communion with God and God communing with people. It relegated that as something that wasn't central, that instead it was these transactions, instead it was these human rituals instead of the divine connection, which the rituals were meant to be symbols manifesting that divine connection. But if the symbol is there and not the reality, then the symbol is meaningless. You can have a symbol that says construction underway and a sign that says construction underway, but there's no construction. Or you may have a symbol of of, oh, this is a computer, or but it actually doesn't work or turn on or something, like without the reality. It's like you could have a sign that says restroom, but if there's no restroom then behind that door, then what is the purpose of that sign? Therefore you heavens rejoice, and all who reside in them. So God wants to dwell in our world as we dwell in our world, that he became a world dweller. And this is one of the most significant things of the incarnation, is the divine, the infinite, chose to dwell in our finitude, to become manifest in our world order. And the only way he could do that is the way we could understand and comprehend, which is as a fellow human being. God can only a human being can truly dwell with another human being. Yes, you may have pets, you may live with them, but they don't truly understand you. You can't really have a deep conversation with them. They can't help you file your taxes. They can't help you do the dishes. I mean, they're living in your home and benefiting from what you do in your home and how you take care of them, but they're not actually a member of your household in a genuine sense as a human, only a human can be. And the miracle and the wonder of the incarnation is God wants to make a home with us. He wants to make a home with us. That's a radical statement, a radical assertion. Many people go through life just seeking, let's say, someone seeking to find a marriage partner and seeking to establish a family, or just seeking friends, or most people who, even if they don't get married, they'll cohabitate or find other people to live with, because human beings were created to dwell with one another, and we're happier and more fulfilled. And also the opposite when we're in relationships. But the point there is that we are seeking relationships, but the truest relationship, the most beneficial relationship we could possibly have, is with our Maker, of God, that can truly lead us and guide us in the true order that we're called to, the true identity we're called to, the true life we're called to. But life we're called to is a partnership. That's why in Genesis, we don't have God making humanity and then God's out of the picture. No, God was there in the garden with them. He wanted to make a home with them. He prepared a home for them to share together. And that's the amazing wonder, is that God, that created the universe, like if many of us fantasize about being with a celebrity, or having a friendship with a celebrity, or someone very influential, or having a friend that's a billionaire give you connections, or someone that just can give you a lot of connections. We all dream of that because of what possibilities it will unlock of what we could do, or who we could be, or how we would be seen in the eyes of the world. And yet the creator of the universe, the one with infinite power, infinite wisdom, omniscient, who has all truth, and who can lead humanity in true flourishing, and he wants to have a relationship with us. That's how wonderful that is. And yet the world and Satan want to destroy that. And Satan destroyed that in the garden, and he wants to continue to destroy it. He's a home wrecker, as we're going to see in the coming chapters. The Hebrew word for tabernacle is shakan. This word means to abide. And abide is a connection. So when Jesus said, you are to be like a vine and the branches, a branch connects to the vine. So it's connected to what the vine is connected to. The vine is connected to the roots that are connected to the soil, that can get nutrients from the soil and soak up water and give life and energy to the branch to produce fruit. In the same way, we're meant to abide in God, we were meant to, the same source of energy, of life, of truth, of character, of love that flows in Christ. He wants to connect us to the very divine energy that flowed through him innately as God. As Hebrews says, that the fullness of God dwelled among us in the radiance of Christ, the full radiance of God, the true glory and beauty and energy and essence of God was manifest in Christ. So Christ is our connection to drawing the divine energy into our soul and spirit, so that we can truly flourish and produce godly fruit in our life that goes beyond what we can do in ourselves. It means to settle down. It means to, when you can go out on dates and sleep around and with other people of the other sex, or just other people. But to settle down means I'm just going to be with this person. I'm not just going to go from this person to this person to this person. I'm going to be with this person, and we're going to do life together. We're going to settle down. We're going to get a house together. We're going to we're going to start a family, or we're going to start an organization, meaning a home. We're going to establish our residence. We're going to do life together. And so Shakan tabernacle is to settle down, to determine that this person is going to be a part of who I am, that my identity is in connection to this person. My life story is going to unfold as through my connection through this person, that we're dependent on one another. Just as I use a spaceship example again, if you go on the Star Trek Enterprise and you are a member of that fleet or that spaceship, you have to settle down. You have to take a job and a responsibility. If you abandon your post, someone's going to replace you and you're going to get in the brig, or they're going to kick you out. Is to settle down is to take a role, a position, and in relation to one another, and to stay true to that and promote the common good by that regular participation, regular promoting and assisting the goals and the good of that organization, and in that context, a spaceship. To dwell, to establish, to build, to erect, to just as erecting a home or establishing an organization or a family or with children, or establishing just, hey, this is our land, we're going to build a home on here, we're going to make it our own, we're going to take care of the soil, we're going to plant crops, we're going to do these things, we're going to establish our existential thumbprint is going to be rooted in this place, and our life story is going to unfold and revolve around what we've built in this place. Be present. Again, you can be present physically, but not in soul and spirit. You may sit in a movie theater with others, be present, and you may see what other people are seeing, and you may all cry together or laugh together, but you're not in the mind of the other person. You're not going to go and talk about the movie afterwards, or you're not going to talk about how that movie relates to your own life story or what you're going through. I mean, yes, you're present, but you're not really present to one another, because people honestly are there not for you, but for the theater, for the movie, for the experience that you're sharing. They're not there for you. They're not paying money to be entertained by the story of your life. And that's actually a tragedy in many respects, because we will pay and do so much to be able to get to a place to watch a fictional narrative, and yet we fail to appreciate and to take in the narratives of people around us that could be very entertaining, but also beneficial, or lessons we could learn. But we go through life engaging or reading or partaking of fictional narratives, while we neglect to be present in our narratives with the narratives of others, so that our life stories can come together and be united. But if we do have friends or connections, and we do share our stories, and our stories become interconnected to an extent. We find this word in the following passages. I will establish a place for my people Israel and settle them there. They will shakan there and not be disturbed anymore. And so this goes from a people who were in slavery, so they did not have a home. They were not their own, and God wanted to give them a home with Him. And so they were those that were treated as less than human, as those that just exist to serve the whims of a Pharaoh, to promote his glory without caring about what's going to happen to them and their well-being and what they want or what they aspire to. They went from a place where they were nameless, faceless, and just a means to someone else's end. And God said, I want to dwell with you. I want to be a part of your life. I want you to be a part of my life. But God wanted to establish a place where they could live together with Him and fulfill the mission they had for the country and the people. He drove the nations out from before them. He assigned them their tribal allotments. And people are very offended by this. That God would say the current occupants of a territory, they don't deserve to keep that territory. I'm going to give it to someone else. But this happens all the time in human life. If you have a tenant and you're renting out a home and they're trashing it and destroying it, you will want to kick them out and bring someone else in. And that's your right as a homeowner. And if someone is abusing and mistreating what is your property that you've lent them to take, then it is your right and prerogative to take it back and to give it someone to treat it better. How are they mistreating it? Is, as we know from even history and as other cultures, they were doing child sacrifice. They were doing very inhumane activities and actions. It was very debauched. It was but just even the fact that they were taking living children and killing them on altars for their gods to promote fertility or promote, there were these, but also the murder and the cruelty that these were, and there's examples of this today where there are cities or in the world that is full of terrible, horrendous activities. Let's say high murder rates, high prostitution rates, high drug addiction rates. And for God, he was saying, this is not what I meant the land to do. This is not what I want this territory, to do. I want to give it to someone else who will take care of the land, who will do righteousness, because sin impacts the environment. You cannot tell me that's not true. If you go to a very sinful environment, you can see it in the nature around it. You can feel it in the air. Sin and evil and debauchery, especially of the most abhorrent kind, it's like a stench. But it also, because if people aren't taking care of their own bodies and taking care of other people's bodies, they're not taking care of nature. They're not respecting nature. They're not respecting the God who created nature. It's a place that's just filthy. Most of the most crime-ridden cities, the places that have most crime are the most neglected, trash, litter, the environment and nature speaks for itself. And so actually God said to Abraham, you're not going to get your territory for 400 years because things haven't got bad enough. So God was giving them time to repent and change. But like Sodom and Gomorrah, they refused. And so God gave the land to someone else, just as any of us would do. We have to be willing to see things from God's point of view and to understand that God called the people of Israel to a better way of life, a better way of dwelling in the world that was to promote the good of the environment, of nature, of the world environment of the Middle East where they were planted, where he would put them. But we can't also ignore that he kicked them out of there. He kicked out Judah, he kicked out Israel. Just read Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. These all tell us that the people that were called to be better homeowners of that territory became worse, and so he kicked them out. So there's no identity politics there. There's no racism there, because God was calling people based on their free will and their actions and their ethics. Are they willing to commit to his covenant and his way of life? Then they could be home dwellers with them. If they wouldn't, they would be kicked out. And people that weren't even born Jews were grafted in. And there are many accounts throughout the Old Testament of people who weren't born in that lineage, but were grafted into that home and became, a perfect example is Rahab, who became a part of the very line of Jesus, became a part of the tribe of Judah, and she became grafted into the homemaking community as she chose to make a home with Israel rather than with the home of Jericho where she lived. And there are other examples of this. So he allowed the tribes of Israel to Shechem, to settle down there, to make a home there. And that home was meant to be ordered by the God relationship. That home was meant to be ordered by the covenant of Abraham and Moses, and the laws, let's say even the Ten Commandments that God established, were meant to be house rules that would govern that home, that organization that was established in the Middle East by the descendants of Abraham. We should recognize several significant implications from this brief word study. Tabernacling entails not just being present in a location, but truly dwelling there. To dwell in a city goes beyond mere physical presence at a particular moment. It involves being shaped by that context of that place. You may even think about yourself. Is there anything you do on a daily basis or weekly basis or monthly basis or yearly basis that helps to promote the good of the city? Are you in any way being a citizen who's helping your city become a better place for people to live. Just think about how you take care of nature when you go out, how you interact with others as you go out. Are you a positive influence on the world around you? Are you having some social, civic duty or to help promote your city? Are you participating in the politics of your city? Not saying we all have to, but if we are going to dwell in a city and we care about it being a good place to live, then we should do our part to help preserve it as a good place to be. Because anyone can tell you that a place can go from being a very good place to live to very terrible, scary, and crime-ridden place to be, or just dirty or trashy place to be, based on the people who dwell in that place. And this happens throughout human history. You can go to cities and towns that used to be very different years ago, but yet they've become disordered and become chaotic because the people who live there have chosen to embrace chaos instead of order. Instead of promoting the good of their community, they become those that are destroying the good of their community and making it languish, or making it decay, or just things not being kept up, and not maintaining things, and not preserving the good of that dwelling in that city. For instance, you would have a permanent residence, identification with local government offices. So I just moved to another state, so I had to get a different license. I had to get an area license plate. I had to do all these things and be able to register to vote in a county or city. I mean, there are all these physical, or these actions we do that affirm that we are a member of that city, a member of that state, and that we have certain rights and privileges that come with it, and responsibilities, let's say taxes, that we pay taxes. And part of our taxes, I mean, yes, there's taxes that are misused and abused, but there are also taxes that maintain the roads, provide safety and security, provide parks, and provide amenities. And so our taxes that we pay are meant to be our part in helping preserve the place we live as a place people want to live. And that's why people, I don't want to get political, but people want the money we give to the government to go to helping make our cities safer, and make our communities a better place, and help the people that are hurting here, and not just going to other countries, even though, yes, we all share planet Earth, and yes, we can help others. But if you don't to make a priority your own children, as someone rightly said, then you're not a good parent. And so our money that we're paying, taxes, are first and foremost meant to preserve the dwelling and the home that we share in the country or city or state that we live in. Employment in the area, adherence to local laws, a subculture affiliation. I mean, yes, you may go to one state, you can smoke cannabis, another state you can't. But if you're in another state, you have to obey by those laws. And so if you're entering that territory, you're agreeing to abide by the house rules of that territory, that's state, because we live in a part of a federalist society, in part where different states have different laws. And so you have to respect the law when you're visiting in another state, you have to be mindful. Just like if you go to Singapore, you better not be chewing gum. I mean, or if you're in a place that does Sharia law, there may be very extreme consequences if women do certain things, or people do certain things, or in some places you can't even share evangelism. Even, unfortunately, even places like in the Middle East, you can't even share the gospel. And if you share the gospel, and this isn't not just Muslim countries, but even the nation of Israel, you can be persecuted, and even a crime to share the gospel in that territory. And I'm not saying that we should abide by those laws, but the point being is, wherever you dwell, wherever you're dwelling currently, you're going to be affected by the laws of that place, because every place has its laws. Just membership, just like if you're in a home and you're dwelling in a home or visiting someone's house, if you're up at midnight blasting very loud music, they probably want you to stay at your house, because there's some house rules about what you should or shouldn't do when it's midnight or 1 a.m. We employ a specific language and idioms. While one might vacation in a given place, only those residing there will be considered locals rather than foreigners. So yes, you may, as a foreigner, you may still be subject to the laws, but you're not truly a resident. You don't truly make your home there. That's not where your taxes are going. That's not where, by and large, when you're getting paid. Yes, you pay taxes when you're there locally, but my point being is that you're not really a member and you're not really a resident of that place. You're just a visitor. Where are you tabernacled? What are some of the contextual factors shaping you and those you tabernacle alongside? How does the world house you're a part of impact your identity and your wayfinding in the world, as opposed to God's tabernacle? Is God's tabernacle your home, or is this world that is without God, that is atheistic, as a world that wants to ignore God, and as, like, just say, many books that you can read in fiction, God doesn't exist in that universe. Many movies you watch, God doesn't exist in that universe. TV shows you watch, a lot of the TV shows and movies and media and news are atheistic in America. God is not relevant. He's not a part of the conversation. He's not even paid attention. Most schools at all, they talk about the creator and they talk about creation, don't talk about the creator. It's absurd, but it's because we live in a sinful, rebellious world that wants to not be in God's house and wants to be our own. We want to make our home without God. We want to lay down our own house rules. We want to lay down our own identities. And we're like, God, I don't want you to define who I am and what I do in the world. I don't want you just as basically saying to someone, I don't want to marry you. Someone may propose to you. You're like, no, I don't want to have a life that's constantly shaped by a dependency to care about you and take care of you and to work with you and to collude or work together with you. I don't want that partnership. I just wanted a good night with you. I just wanted to have some fun, and I'm done with you. And so people want that with God, where they'll say, oh God, I just want you when I need a miracle or where I need some help, but then God does it, and it's like, okay, God, I'm done. I'm on my own now. I'm just going to do my own thing. And that's how society is. The news will only talk about God when a tragedy happens, and they'll say, oh, we pray, our prayers are with those people, but that's or we're praying for someone that's trapped or someone to get help or something. Then yeah, they may bring up God, but besides that, besides wanting God to do something, intervene, we're like, God, I don't want you in the picture. It's just like a child that just comes to a parent when they need money. They don't actually want to listen to their parent or to take advice from their parent, or even care what's going on in their parent's life. They just want money. Tabernacling requires a fixed position of dwelling, demarcated by finite contextualities or existential parameters. We have to dwell. We have to take ownership, to be defined in a way by that dwelling. We need to promote the good of that dwelling and help promote the order of that dwelling. Tabernacle requires engagement, responsibility. It requires an ethical commitment and that you need to use your will to promote the good of that community or the organization or that home. Moreover, this act of settling down also impacts the roles and relations one has with oneself, others, and the environment. Obviously, if you are visiting a small town, you'll interact and go about the business, do your thing very differently than if you live there. You won't have those relationships and those roles that you would have if you actually lived there and had a job there, or would be a part of some groups there, or to have some friendships, or to form any connections with people there. Consequently, the mode in which a person settles impacts the various existential aspects of how they present or become present to the world. To put things in biblical context, God created us human beings as tabernacle creatures. We were created to tabernacle, to dwell, to make a home. And that's why, yes, the internet and technology can be a way of tabernacling, but it's almost a disembodied way of tabernacling, where it's different talking to someone on a video versus on a text message or in a video game versus being present physically with someone. Most of our communication is nonverbal. Most of our are just doing life together in the context of reality. It changes how you understand and how you interact with each other in the context of the real world and what's actually really happening in the physical world. And so God created us to be physical beings, to work and operate through bodies. We're not ghosts that are just temporarily dwelling in a human body, and the human body is just something we're going to throw off and then never have again. No, as the scriptures say, Christ has a new body for us. And so we were created to be physical beings, dwelling in a community, dwelling in a context, having responsibilities, having a call to promote the good of that community and to maintain it and to also defend it and to protect it. As God gave us the spiritual weapons, just as Jesus sought to cast out demons, we are to stand against forces of darkness that seek to corrupt and destroy true homes, true community, true souls and spirits of human beings that are created to be a home of God, and yet the home wrecker Satan is causing havoc and chaos in the human soul. Just talk to any addict, as there are millions and millions of addicts in this world, or people that are suffering from great oppression or depression or abuse, that you can see that their lives are being wrecked by these forces. And to be a good neighbor, a good fellow dweller, is to help bring order to their life and to help promote the good of their soul and to help counteract that evil presence. And so a part of tabernacling in this life is defending and fighting against the forces that come to destroy our home, as God makes very clear in the scriptures. I'm not saying we should physically fight other people. It's spiritually fight against the spiritual forces, let's say hate or depression or addiction or shame or these despair or these evil spirits that come to haunt and to dwell in humans. We're meant to be a force against those evil spirits that seek to undermine the home that God created in humanity to dwell among us and with us. As discussed previously, we have an inner drive toward living in our households in a fitting manner. We desire security, stability, and fulfillment and peace. Even those that are criminals will want to have some form of security and stability in their organization, or else they're just going to turn on each other and be ineffective because they'll lose all their manpower and they won't be able to work together and they won't be able to listen or obey each other's agendas or plans for criminal activity. There has to be some camaraderie, some trust. I mean, a lot of this even goes down to trust in community and households, and fulfillment and peace. I mean, you live with someone you trust they won't kill you in the middle of the night. I mean, how much trust do you have to be to go to bed in a home? Just think about that. How much trust do you have to go to bed in a home where other people live or other people could get into your home? I mean, almost none of us live in an impenetrable fortress, but when we go to sleep, we believe there's something in this world that's going to protect us, whether there's police, whether there's just common decency of people, or whether we have guns in our home. But at the end of the day, if you're asleep, you can't protect yourself. Someone could kill you easily. And so a part of home, and what it means to home, is you trust the people who live with you aren't going to harm you. And that's unfortunately what happens in a lot of marriages and even friendships, is what used to become a commitment of, I'm going to promote your good, you're going to promote my good, I'm going to defend you, I'm going to get your back, and you're going to protect my back. And then a year or two later, that person is your enemy, and that's the person that's hurting you and not just not protecting you, but they're hurting you with their words, they're hurting you with their fists or the bodies, and they've become an enemy. And that is because the evil spirits that are working this world want to turn us against each other, want to destroy any semblance of the unity that God established. And that's why human history is filled with violence and disorder, even in families, even in communities, even society against society, man against man, woman against woman, son against father, father against son. Is Satan's agenda is to promote discord and animosity instead of the trust and love and protection that we're supposed to give each other that God established. And that is probably one of the most, the World War II or World War I or just the Civil War is a perfect example of the gone wrongness that we have in our world, where people that live in the same nation that are meant to be compatriots together and work together and protect each other are now at war against each other. And just that can happen in the family, that can happen in a nation, that can even happen one nation, like World War II. I think it's World War II. America be allies with the Soviet Union, Russia, and then they become enemies. And this whole discord of humanity, home living and home dwelling of nation against dwelling with nation, is there's forces at work even in our day that's trying to throw division and strife in the community of nations and the community that happens at the national level and national politics and division. We've seen this in America. Extreme it's so sad because politics have divided us. It's like, you're red, you're blue, we hate you, you hate us, and we're enemies. We live in a very competitive society. Obviously, for a fascination with sports and teams, but we're very competitive. Even our school system is based on competition at large part, and our society and our economy is based on competition in a lot part. But we're so prone to just see the other side of the political spectrum of our enemies, even though we all want to live in a safe society. We all want, most of us want our children to succeed, or we want to not be have justice turn against us and to be used against us. I mean, we want to have safe roads. We all want to have health care. I mean, at the end of the day, there's so much that would unite us, and yet all these news organizations that are making money off this strife and division and all the rhetoric online, but there's just so much at work to divide us as a nation rather than to unite us as people that just want to live in a safe and prosperous society. And yet we're so divided by so many things that and that's just the spirit of division that's at work in our nation, that's been at work in the world from the time of Adam and Eve. In an existential sense, we lose a core part of ourselves when separated from the self-authenticating contextualities of our tabernacle world context. Just think about how someone who's always lived with their family until 18 and leaves, and they're no longer living with their family, they're no longer with their friends they grew up with, they're no longer a part of the organizations, and now they're living in another city, completely in a new organization. There's a lot of, oh, now I need to discover myself anew. And now that the parents, when the child comes back a year later, they're like, who is this child? Because their whole identity has been uprooted, and they're finding themselves anew within a new home, a new context, a new way of life, a new expectation of the world around them, the new social groups and the social expectations and the narratives that are going around, let's say on college campus or wherever they're living, that they start adapting and becoming shaped by a whole new world and a whole new society, and so they become almost like a new person. And this happens so much in our country when people kids go to college, especially if they leave their home. They become so radically. They can become so radically different because all those contextualities are removed, and now they're having to find new contextualities, new identity, new relations, new sense of self in a whole new home. We discover our roles and identities through them, which can be referred to as a being there that properly befits our existence. And actually, go back to that, is a lot of what's common is uh, children would go to college and disassociate and disown their parents and their way of life because they've become a new home, a new worldview, a new way of looking at the world, a new way of understanding themselves, and it's opposed and juxtaposed to the self they were. And so their parents are a reminder of the self they were. Their old church they went to or their old school is a reminder of the self that in their mind now is a false self, a self they weren't meant to be, that they don't want to be reminded of that self, that's a self they're ashamed of, and their parents remind them of that, and that's why there's so many bad relationships with 20-year-olds and their parents, because the 20-year-olds have taken on a new identity, a new meaning, a new selfhood, but yet their old connections of their past, whenever it's brought to mind, it reminds them of where they came from and who they were. And if they are ashamed of that and they don't want to be connected to that, then they will associate their parents with that. And so they will disconnect from their parents and disassociate with them and not really be present with them. Even if they may come for Thanksgiving or Christmas or stuff, it's as if a stranger's at their house, because a stranger is at their house. They're no longer co-dwellers in life. They're no longer wayfinders finding the way together in life. So, and this is something we don't understand in America, as if you're a Christ follower, you go to church, you say the sinner's prayer, is you don't understand what it meant to be a Christ follower in Jesus' day. To be a Christ follower in Jesus' day was to kick out the synagogue. What was a synagogue? The synagogue was your seat of your social meaning, identity, your social credit, your social, why people would trust you, why people would associate with you, why people would work with you or talk with you or do life with you. If you were kicked out of the synagogue, you were like a child kicked out of the home. And you don't have a job and you don't have anywhere else to go. I mean, to follow Jesus is to lose your sense of self and belonging in the world. And many people experience this if they come to Jesus in a Muslim community, or even if they're in China or something. To become a Christian, a true Christian, is to become an enemy of the state. It's to become disowned by your family. I mean, I encourage you to look into Voice of the Martyrs, but Voice of the Martyrs is a organization that tells a story and helps promote and take care of those that have been affected by persecution or even martyrdom. Let's say if a father is martyred, then they will help the mother and the children, and the mother to be able to take care of their children at their father's death. But if you read the stories of what's happening in our day, in our year, in 21st century, there are many people that once they follow Jesus, they are completely kicked out of their home. The kids, they are disassociated from their family. Their wives divorce them. Their husbands divorce them. And their kids disassociate with them. They can't get a job. They are ostracized. They're even sometimes imprisoned or beaten or even killed. They're no longer a part of society. They're no longer welcome in society. They're seen as anathema, as a plague on society. They're seen as an enemy of society, as an enemy, as an other, as an alien, and they're kicked out. And that's what it was. In some ways, in many ways, what it was like to follow Jesus. And that's why when you take the story of Jesus healing, I think it was a man born blind, and his own parents don't even really come to his defense because they're afraid of getting kicked out of the synagogue by saying Jesus is a good man, and what Jesus did was good, because their community leaders said, no, what Jesus is doing is bad. He's an enemy of the state. He's an enemy of true Judaism and what we represent as a people. And so they are willing to disassociate with their son. And this is the same reason that Nicodemus only met Jesus at night, because to become affiliated with Jesus would possibly taint and compromise his status and his job and his position and everything he's built up for decades and decades of his life and career could all be destroyed in an instant. People who've gone through cancel culture in America cannot understand this. Someone can work and have build up this position in society, and yet they say something that the world system holds as blasphemy and say, you need to be kicked out, you need to be ostracized, you need to be a representative of what is other against what we are and what we stand for, and they're canceled like that, and they're removed from their platform, they're kicked out of their job, they're kicked out of their teaching position or whatever they have. This is a taste of what it was like to follow Christ. And so a part of this journey, even this wayfinding, is finding this radical way, redefining our life, redirecting our life, taking on a new worldview, taking a new life view that God calls us to. Isn't just a simple prayer. It's not just a simple statement. It is a commitment. It is a revolution of the self. It is like someone signing up for the military. They're not their own anymore. They're going to be broken down to be built up again, and they're going to be put on the front line possibly. Is your life's not your own if you follow Christ. And most people, they don't want the cost of discipleship. And that's why Jesus talked and warned about the cost of discipleship. You can't have Christ without discipleship. You can't have a home with God without committing to the way of life and the homemaking that God has established. So in Jesus' day, in other words, one would lose core context, relations, and roles that largely shaped their whole way of life and identity up to that point. Hence, many of those who believed in Jesus were not willing to follow him. Just take, for example, if you're going through the American school system and you're a senior, and if you follow Jesus, you can't graduate and you can't get into any college. How would that make you feel? How would that change your way of life and what you're doing in life? If suddenly becoming associated with Jesus, your whole trajectory of life is no longer available to you. Your life path and life journey is now gone. I mean, like you can't be that self anymore, and you've given up that self, then you have to find a new self and a new calling and new opportunities. Hence, many of those who believed in Jesus were not willing to follow him. Just you could read plenty of stories in the Bible. People believed in God, but they weren't willing to take a step of faith. They weren't to risk something on that. Yes, I believe they believed that God would protect Israel, but they wouldn't face Goliath, or they wouldn't march around Jericho, or they wouldn't step out like Peter. I believe in you, Jesus, but Jesus says, come out of the boat and walk on the water. If you don't walk on the water, you don't actually trust and believe in Jesus. I mean, you can believe and think something up here, but when life demands you to take action on that belief, like if you're on, actually Indiana Jones has a good example of this, where there's an abyss and he has to step out in faith that there's an invisible bridge. Like, you could have faith there's a bridge, but unless you walk on the bridge and to act in light of that belief, risking that if that belief is false, you're dead, just like Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego. They were willing to die, but but if their belief in God was nothing, then they're just forfeiting their whole life and what laid ahead of them in Babylon by not bowing down to the king and recognizing the king as God. And so they risked in faith in Yahweh, and that faith required them to take action. And so just as the book of James makes very clear, faith without works is dead. And that's a part of even our journey of what is a work that God requires? What is a way of life that God calls us to? What does it mean to live by faith? I'm going to skip this section. This is just on how the American dream and what it means to be an American, and how the American dream shapes our worldview and how we tabernacle and kind of the order that we seek and the ambitions and goals that we seek as Americans. In previous histories in America, the American dream was very different. Before we had electronics and cars and suburbs and consumer culture and modern corporations, the American dream was very different. You can think of the ideal was to possess your own land, to just have land, to enjoy religious freedom, to be able to practice. I mean, one of the core reasons that people came to America was because they couldn't practice their faith. They couldn't have an organization around their faith publicly and in society recognized and allowed to happen. That their government didn't allow it. So they came here to try to make a new home so that they could be free to organize themselves in religion. I mean, it is very ironic that people say, the separation of church and state, whereas people came here for the separation of church and state, but they meant that people were free to order themselves based on their religious convictions collectively that they agreed to, and so that they could associate with one another. And so a lot of actually the different communities were based on different denominations or religious sects within Christianity. Puritans would live over here, Methodists would live over there. They were free to practice and form a community and an order around their religion. And the state wasn't allowed to get in the way of that and say, no, just because you're not Catholic, you can't practice your religion. Or you can't have a church building, you can't have your free association, your organizations of religion. But the purpose of the Founding Fathers, even the separation of church and state, would just say that no one sect of religion could keep other sects of religion from ordering and associating and living the life that they believed God wanted them to, and how to practice their religion. They wanted the freedom to do that without the state aligning themselves with one sect within Christianity and being at odds with the others. It was not to say society needs to be godless or anti-religion. You can't read American history and think that America was a secular experiment. It was exact opposite. Religion was the heart. Even the universities most of them started through religious institutions. Even the Yales and the Harvards and even the medical systems in our country and so much of our society was established and built up through religious organizations and institutions. But it was a freedom for these different sects of Christianity to establish their own society and around their religion, and that they could still be Americans, but they could still have separate homes and separate ways of life and organizations in the country, and they would still be associated by taxes, and if there was a war, to fight to protect one another, that we're still American, and we have certain responsibilities and agreements. But a part of that agreement is you're not going to persecute me for my religion, and using the state to do that. They saw that in Europe. They saw the state become a system of persecution. And what has happened in America? The state became an agent of persecution. COVID's a perfect example where, hey, you can go to a bar or strip club, but you can't go to church. Or you can practice Satanism on Twitter, but you can't say certain things that align with Christianity or that Christianity ethics. You can say these other sects of religions of America have a voice, but the Christian or the fundamental Christians don't have a voice. They need to be ostracized or canceled or rejected, or even persecution of I don't want to get in too deep, but there's a lot of examples of in the last 20 years and that Christian institutional organizations have been persecuted because of their Christian foundation, whereas other groups that aren't are given are put first or are favored. And there's been a lot of examples of this that's gone even in the tax system, of how the tax system would treat certain religious organizations. But what I'm trying to get to is the whole point was that the government wouldn't be a means of persecuting different religious beliefs. And it wasn't meant to stifle belief. It was just meant to promote religious freedom. Anyways, But the idea of the pursuit of freedom and the freedom to even own land, like people came from a place where you couldn't buy land if you weren't certain groups of people, and it's even happened in certain countries, even countries that America are friends with, where they've actually done laws that if you're not of this ethnicity, you can't own property, or your property is taken from you and given to someone else of a different ethnicity. That's racism. But that has happened in the world, unfortunately. But it's something where people come to America. They wanted to believe that people who become citizens can vote, can have property, can have possessions, and that can't be confiscated at will by the government or by other people, and that there are these values and principles that early Americans had that weren't the values of the American dream that we see today. That the American dream and the whole experiment was very different 200 years ago than it is today. Our identifications with suitable roles and commitments made to reach these ideals influence our behavior and interactions with our shared world. Roles such as husband, father, citizen, co-worker, employer, friend, consumer, voter, they inform our perception and actions engagement with our surroundings. Is all this to say is our roles and relations in the tabernacle we dwell in, the world we dwell in, it shapes who we are. It shapes, if you've just like... imagine you being an NPC in a game and it's just labeling characteristics and affiliations, or even think of someone's obituary where it goes through their relations, where they worked, when they went to university, and just a lot of our roles and identities all take shape in the tabernacle we dwell in. If we didn't stay in one place for a long time or affiliate with the same group of people for a significant period of time, there wouldn't be that narrative or those connections of identity only take form through that stability of us staying in a place, dwelling in a place for a period of time to form true connections and relationships and responsibilities, or even having a job that lasts more than a day when you're working at a job for years and years and then going to another job. They're different roles that you have in life that were about you occupying and dwelling and being a part of co-dwelling with other people in certain places at certain times. And this is our sense of self, and it's our sense of trueness, and that's where I want to get to. There's the ethics of how we're to treat others and how we're to be good human beings, and then there's the ethics of God. And the ethics of God may sometimes go against the ethics of humans, that humans will think certain behavior and actions are not becoming, or just you shouldn't, like, just take for example this no soliciting. It just totally contradicts evangelism. To say, oh, it is good and loving not to share your beliefs or impose your beliefs on other people. Well, if you believe that a hurricane's about to happen and someone doesn't know about it and they're not ready for it, you probably should tell them. Even if their sign says no soliciting, they may not have a TV or access to that information, so they can't act accordingly. I mean, that logic falls apart in just how much we do want outside information and outside help and outside revelations, or just someone knock us on the head to say, hey, there's a wildfire a few miles away, or it's coming here, you better get out of here. Yes, they may not believe that, but hey, maybe you'll need to knock them out and get them to safety. I mean, the point being is humanity's ethics and God's ethics don't necessarily align. And what we're seeking in this journey is, what does it mean to abide by the ethics of God's house versus humanity's house? Because the Bible is a testament of so many people who are at odds with the ethics of society and cast out and rejected or even condemned or killed by society because they stood up for the society and culture and the standards of God's house. And so sometimes they align and sometimes they do not. But the question is where do we find alignment from? Where do we find our true way of life, our true identity from? God's household or humanity's household? If it's humanity's household, then our fate is tied to humanity's household. And humanity's household is fleeting, but God's house is not fleeting. I mean, a perfect example of this, I think it's Pompeo, but a city that people had built and established and had so much invested in, and then yet in one day or 1 hour, they're all dead. Or think of Hiroshima when the nuclear bomb was dropped, or any world war where it just devastates an entire city. Like, our way of life, our culture, our society can be wiped out and be stripped from us in an instant, in a moment. I mean, you have one nation invade another nation and then take a lot of those people as prisoner of wars. I mean, their whole way of life, identity, everything they've built up is all gone. I mean, it's easy for a society where you live in peace, but where you live in a society where raiders and bandits are constantly coming in, stealing women, stealing property, stealing food. I mean, life can be very volatile and risky. And we in America or other countries that live in relative prosperity, we take it for granted just how volatile being a human and living in a human society is, especially throughout human history, when many groups of people lived in a city or a town that was ransacked or pillaged by other towns and cities. And so building up a human society was risky, and committing to a human society was risky, especially trying to build a home and plant crops, not knowing if your house is going to be burned or your crops are going to be stolen, or raising children and not knowing if your children are going to be sold into slavery. Let us explore biblical examples. Actually, let me go back to this question for you. What ideal of fittingness are you pursuing? How do you think your contextual environment impacts this image? Do you believe this is a worthy image of fittingness to pursue? How do you go about your day? How do you find fittingness in the world, the society, the culture, the home you live in? And is that the fittingness that God has called you to? Let's explore some biblical examples. Let's take, for example, the traditions and social customs of ancient Jewish society. These customs shaped how community identity based on societal norms established law of Moses. Let's take the Sabbath. The Sabbath was a very radical and very otherworldly principle. Don't work on the Sabbath. 1 day a week, you're not supposed to work. And we're surrounded by societies that work 7 days a week. That's absurd. That doesn't make sense. It's not from a human standpoint, but it would just radically change how that society operates. And this is very clear in places of the earth that strictly observe the Sabbath. Even their dishwashers are different. Their refrigerators are different. There's just so much different about what's happening, what they do, and what they don't do on the Sabbath. So devout Jews traditionally and still do wear distinct insignia to signify the dedication to the law and their study of the Holy Scriptures. So certain people, because of their religion, will wear certain things to affiliate themselves with their religion. Today, many Jews continue to avoid non-kosher foods, so how you eat. I already talked about the Sabbath. Although these significant contextual influences have evolved over time, they have never been completely erased or lost. And so a part of what's very respectful of and amazing of the Jewish people is for thousands of years, people of Jewish descent are still observing these rituals and these ways of life and these ways of doing life together that have been around for thousands of years. And there's something very that we can have great respect for. Another example, think about the early Gentile believers. Upon embracing the faith, they need to adjust their way of living and perception to align with the Jewish spirituality and monotheistic view. So they lived in a society of polytheism, a society that was very religious, and a society that would even have pagan rituals being involved in economic activities. And this actually, Paul gets into this in the Corinthians about the food sacrifice to idols and stuff. But these Gentiles, their whole, and especially when you're born in a society where you think the emperor is a god among many gods, and there's a pantheon of gods, and God for this, a God for that, that they were called to be pluralistic and to embrace all faiths and embrace all these different gods. As long as you can embrace all these other gods, or you can embrace your own God, but you had to acknowledge Caesar as the God that you are going to submit to and be submitted to as a civil servant. But you could still worship these other gods. But Christians would believe, no, only Christ Jesus, only God deserves true adoration and worship. In trying to reorganize their existence, they embraced previously unfamiliar religious traditions, social customs, and historical narrative. Their whole way of life was upended, changed. Their way of being human in the world changed. However, they were unable to fully overlook or eliminate the contextual effects of their non-Jewish heritage. Attempts by the Judaizers. So these were a group of early Christians who believed that if you're a Gentile, you had to convert to all of Judaism and become a Jew first, and then you could become a Christ follower. So you had to submit to the entire Levitical code of how to how to live, how to be in the world in order to be a Christian. That's why one of the dreams that Peter got when he was called to the Gentiles was God told him to eat unclean, what the Old Testament considered unclean animals. And then he's like, no, I'm not going to touch this. And he says, what I've said is clean is clean. And so Christ or God was establishing a new covenant. The new covenant wasn't there to enforce and be the full, to just be an add-on to the old covenant. And Paul says, if I circumcise myself, believing that in so doing I've fulfilled the law of God, then I've made Christ useless to me. And so he made very clear to the Judaizers that you first become a Christ follower, and it's not about becoming first a Jew, but it's first about being baptized into the family of God and the home of God that transcends race. The social and personal standards of Christianity are similar yet distinct from those of Judaism. Ultimately, the limitations of a person's context and living conditions will always shape their assumptions. This influences how an individual perceives and engages with the spiritual dimensions of life. For instance, consider a person with materialist beliefs sees the world and themselves differently from someone who adheres to spiritual truths. Just think of someone who grows up in a Japanese or, let's say, another Eastern culture that sees spirits in nature and spirits permeating the world, or even spirits in AI or machine, and versus someone who doesn't see spirits at all. They're going to have a very different worldview and a different way of relating to the world around them. If you don't believe there's a spiritual connection to a tree, then it's not going to affect you cutting down the tree, or about destroying the natural habitat. And that's why even a lot of very interesting Asian movies and animes, or even Miyazaki films, which a lot of them I do love, and they have a lot of interesting ideas that are universal to the human condition. But one of the ideas is the threat of industrialization on nature, and how the pursuit of human technology and advancement can lead to the degradation and disrespect of nature, of humans playing God and even trying to usurp nature's place in the world. And even Tolkien kind of got into this a little bit with Saruman versus the Ents. The machines and the fires and all the trees were cut down to promote the engine of war that he was building, and yet the Ents, which were the tree herders, the tree shepherds, those that were taking care of the trees, that saw the trees more than just something to be consumed, but saw the spiritual side of it and the layered narrative and the true place of trees in the world. To without trees, none of us would be here. If all the trees were gone on planet Earth in a minute, it would drastically and negatively impact our world and our whole ecosystem. But the point there is seeing that conflict arising, and so there are different worldviews, and those worldviews can impact how we dwell in the world, how we relate to the world. The former may pray solely for material success or stress relief, while the latter might pray for the grace to live righteously and the strength to endure persecution or suffering for Christ's sake. And we'll get into this later, but it's very unfortunate and very sad how Christianity becomes a means just to pursue the worldly agendas and worldly prosperity, with completely ignoring everything Christ taught that is the exact opposite, and that even ultimately calls us to be willing to lay down our life. It's like, oh, follow Jesus, you're going to be rich. Follow Jesus, you may be killed, or your kids may be killed, or you may lose everything. I mean, one will sell in the American dream world and one won't. And so some pastors will peddle religion as a means to promote your worldly agenda, whereas Christ said if you hold on to your life, you will lose it. If you lose your life for my sake, you will find it. And as actually, we'll get into this in a lot more detail as we go. This does not imply that a person's context deterministically shapes their entire identity. The Gentile believers, after all, made a conscious choice to abandon or reinterpret parts of their original way of life. So let's just even talk about the domestication of animals. Animals would never have been domesticated if humans didn't domesticate them and breed them and train them over generation and generation and generation. You have to do radical intervention from outside forces, human intervention, to domesticate animals. And we live from the fruit of that labor that was done thousands or hundreds of years ago. But the beauty thing of humanity is humans can make choices to radically alter their way of being in the world, just as domesticated animal is very different than a wild animal in the world, and their way of being and relating to humans and relating to each other and just living is fundamentally different. But humans, on the other hand, can choose to abandon or reinterpret parts of their way of life. Humans can rebel against the world order that has established them and raised them. Humans can become radically other than the culture that raised them. And so, unfortunately, someone that's raised in a household that respects human life may go on and kill children in a school. That's a fact. That's happened. And happens. I mean, someone can be raised very well and turn out very bad and make very bad choices and become very evil and do terrible things. And someone that was born and raised under terrible, violent, and abusive circumstances can grow up to be someone that's a great positive light and influence on the world. And so part of the point here isn't that our context have to define us and our world situations have to define us. We have a choice. And the question is, what choice are we going to make? What way are we going to find in our lifetime? Our discussion implies that the horizon of our dwelling shapes how we navigate the world in a befitting way, meaning what we see as the ultimate goal of life will impact how we choose to navigate. And it may be different than the way that society around us only has certain objectives on, hey, you need to be successful in school, you need to get a high-paying job, you need to get a good retirement, and this is our horizon of success and fulfillment in the world, versus the Christian worldview that might be fundamentally different. We must acknowledge and cannot disregard these existential realities. Let's just dive deeper into religious beliefs as called contextual. Their impact on a perceived befitting role within a person's world house can obviously be significant. For instance, a person's notion of self-fittingness may take the form of faithful religious adherence, like Paul. Such a person seeks to present themselves and manifest their becoming to others by piously holding on to the house rules of a particular religion. However, this presencing of a selfhood may not necessarily equate to the true tabernacling, especially the sort that the divine finds appropriate. And so, what we're ultimately trying to seek is what is the way of dwelling, way of presence, way of becoming that humanity that we were truly meant to have. What is a true context that should define us? What is a true life goal that should define us? What is a true relations that should define us? What is a true creed or house rules that should define us? And so, and religions specifically, and those who practice religion faithfully and on a daily basis, are those who the theology, the worldview, the teachings, the ethics, the creed, the social commitments that are required in that religion, they shape one's way of life and lifestyle. And someone can be religious but not be religious. Like, you can practice a religion for a few hours a week, put on the hat, go through the rituals, and then take that hat off and be a secularist the rest of the week. True religion is when your view of the divine impacts your view of yourself and your way of life throughout the week. That your view of the divine is as important as eating and having a career. That your relationship with the divine and your duty to the divine is something that defines your lifestyle, defines your life view, defines your direction in life. But even there, the question is, well, which view of the divine, which way of the divine is the true one? And so Paul is a great example of someone who is very religious and faithfully religious to the core, and yet his religion was not of God's house. It was a false God's house. It was a pagan house. And paganism is, in essence, untrueness to the true divine revelation of who God is, of how he is in the world. And that's what we're going to be getting into. That's what we're seeking, is what is a true way of understanding the divine in connection with our humanity, in connection with our destiny, in connection with the true way of life we should pursue. We're going to be taking a break, but before we do, let's consider this question. Have you ever relinquished or reframed your way of living before? Have you ever had to radically make a decision or in your life or a career path, or let's say even who you were dating or marrying, or just whatever it was, but you had to just change so much of your life. So much of your life was never the same after making that decision. Did you believe you could entirely evade the impact of your previous living habits? Like, in that moment, did you really understand the price you were paying for that decision? If so, how? If not, how? And ultimately, has following Christ become that to you? Have you had to actually lay down your life to follow Christ? If you have, what does it look like? If you don't, why not? Why are you holding on to your life? What life are you holding on to, and what do you need to let go of?